I'm going to show you the exact project management system that I use to run my $30 million agency, and it's not what you think. Most founders think you can send an email and a project will magically get done, but it's not necessarily the case. My name's Scott Bartnick. I run a 2x Inc. 5000 business with over 75 employees, and I teach business owners how to implement systems in their business. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how I implement project management and systems to have my business run without me. Let's jump right into the screen share. And what you'll see here is, first off, high level, we're gonna look at two types of projects. We're gonna have client-facing projects and then internal projects, because they're both gonna be pretty much the same thing. What we have to do is turn the project management process into a system. Now, in this video, we're gonna use an example of a project management tool, but you can use literally any project management tool you want. The one caveat is, I would say, get out of Excel. You need an actual tool that's designed for project management, because what it'll do is build in some safety and guardrails so you can actually start to build systems around this. So very high level, when you look at a system, there's a few things to pay attention to. You're gonna have basically an order coming in, whether an order is from a client or it's an internal project. We're gonna call, in this case, that an order. Once that order comes in, you're going to basically want to get that work done. So that's actually doing the job. You're gonna need a way to deliver the work. And then from there, you're gonna want some type of feedback loop so you know if the work was done properly. Now, when it comes to actual project management, there are only 5 things you really need. So number one really is owner. Owner has to come first, and you can't really have a project that's more than just an idea until it's assigned to someone. Once you assign that to someone, it becomes a work in progress where you're getting closer to work. Now, just having an owner isn't really good enough, especially if you have multiple projects, priorities, you don't know what direction to go into, you don't have clarity on how that works. So if you just send an email to someone on your staff and said, hey, can you do this X, Y, and Z? I'm sure if it was order a new paper, that's perfectly fine. They're gonna get it done for you. But if it's a big company-wide project or a client project, you're gonna need more details. You're gonna need what we would just basically that. We'll need order details. So in this, we're gonna say a lot of the rest of the scope. So what is the project? What are we ordering? When is it due? What is the priority of this project? And then what are goals? What does good look like? So those are the 5 things that you need in any given project to really make them more successful. Now, how does that work into project management? So basically, instead of just sending an email to your team, what you do is you build these pieces into the project management tools. So I have one pre-set up, and we'll build some together. So if you're new to project management, don't worry. We'll walk through from the beginning on how to build this, but I have one already set up, and this is specifically towards a new client. So let's go through this together and see what we would need to do. So when I'm building project management, I typically build it through the steps that actually need to be taken. So in a high level, we want them to go from order to work to delivered to feedback. And feedback is really when we're done. We're not done just by delivery because we don't know if we need revisions or if it was even done right or if we hit our goals. So we're gonna jump back in here and say we have a new subscription. Someone just came in and they purchased from us. So let's just call this Bob. So Bob's coming in and he's purchased something from us. Right now, all we know is Bob has a new subscription. There's no details, no one's assigned to it, there's no owners, there's no what did Bob order? We don't know anything. And so this is a big issue when it comes to project management, is sometimes it's just clarity. We're not giving enough details. So in here, we can assign this project to the owner. I'm just gonna assign it to myself for this example. So when I said project management built in a lot of the things that you already need, and that's why a spreadsheet just sucks, is because it does. You just put this in here and you make custom templates, which is a little bit more advanced and we don't need to do that, but we're just gonna walk through it. So we have owner right now. So let's just go back to our data right here. So we have owner, done. Now we're gonna give it a due date because it's already just next in our system. So in here, we're gonna give it a due date. Let's just say we need this done in 2 days. For this example, I'm using Asana. Another project management tool that I really like is Notion. It doesn't, again, they all work really close to the same, monday.com. There's so many tools that it doesn't matter what the tool is, really pay attention to the system. So we've got owner, we've got due date, we've got what's next. I'm gonna save order details, priorities, we're gonna put together, and goals. So this is where you can build that custom template, or you can just put it in here. So order details, jump back into here. So new video, and then link. So let's just say we're gonna edit a video. Here's the link. then we want to make sure that we have, so that's just our order details. So we have some information. Again, this is just an example, but this, hopefully you'll see how this is basically like if you just had a really good template for an email, but then we're going to show you the cadence to tracking this and how you actually get it to move through your system, which is the big advantage. So now we're going to come in here, priorities. So priorities, usually I don't write what the priority is in the project. I set that based on either what I call their role operating system or standard operating procedure, or if it's more of an internal project, that's where we're going to set really clear priorities. So we'll kind of do that later, but you could put in a template is like, let's just call this, I like to use like P3. So this is a P3 priority. So I have P1 is top priority, P2 is medium, and P3 is it can happen later. Now for client facing, it's probably going to be a P2 or a P1. Like this just needs to happen and we need to have it happen on the due date. And so you set those cadences in other places and stick around because I will show you exactly how that works. Now the last thing in here is goals. So for a client project, the goal could be as simple as goal 1 revision max. So let's just say we're editing this video and the goal is for the client to be satisfied with the video edits in 1 revision or less. And so if they are able to hit this deadline and then have 1 revision or less, we're happy. Now that's a very basic goal. And as you get more advanced, you'll maybe, if you have tied to metrics, if you have a guarantee, all of that builds in, but I just want to show you how simple this is. Now, of course, you can build in subtasks and other things here, but I'm just trying to keep this really high level. So what I think is more important is the system behind what's actually kind of the flow of this. In each stage of a new project, we have an owner. The risk to any project is a potential product handoff. Typically, you don't see that in internal projects, and I'll show you how to build that board from scratch next, but I'm just going to quickly walk you through here. So with this new order, basically we've documented the steps that our clients go through to onboard them. So they place a new order, we double check that their billing is done, and this could be a subtask, but the thing here is we make sure that for us, sales owns making sure billing is done because we don't want to hand it off to billing and then there's a handoff. So that handoff is an opportunity for things to fall through the cracks. So sales just need to go confirm it and it's their responsibility. Then we're going to go over to onboarding. So our sales team again is responsible to make sure that the product's actually onboarded so that they do their onboarding form and everything gets done. So as soon as their onboarding form is done, this is our first handoff when it comes to project management for this client. Now, this is the danger piece because we just changed people. So you need a process in here. So when we change someone in our system, we obviously reassign it. So I'm just going to put in our company. And then what we do is we make sure to tag them. And that's where we need clear ownership. So we might even update the due date. So maybe this person has 1 day to get this done. So it's this. So they have to finish this product in 1 day. So this is how we kind of set it up. And then we just continue to move through the steps in our business. For a while, I really struggled with how to build these out so they'd be successful. And the reality is you have to mirror your current process. So what are each steps? And then how do you figure out how to reduce the handoffs in projects? So if you can have one person own as much of it as possible, that's going to be much better than if we go back to this original process and we looked at here, we basically had a sale, which was sales, and then we handed it to billing, but then billing handed it back to sales, and then sales handed it to our COO, and then our COO handed it to ops. You see how there's a whole bunch of opportunities for something to get lost. So basically sales is responsible for this handoff, and then our COO basically hands that off to operations. Now sales is involved in this onboarding call, and then once that onboarding call is done, the handoff is complete. So our sales team is still monitoring. Now the next thing you'll see in here in our project is opportunities for feedback. So when it comes to client management, we want to get feedback as much as possible so we make sure that we're doing a good job and we retain our clients. Now with this, we really have to find ways to get feedback. So what we do is we push for a first win as soon as possible. Now in this next step is actually our first, I'd call it a micro win. And what we're looking at is we're building out a strategy plan. And for us, our clients have to sign off the strategy plan. Now when they sign the strategy plan, they're giving feedback on what we've done so far. Now it's very high level, obviously it's just the strategy, but we're getting them to acknowledge things, and we're having, if they are not happy, we ask them to be very brutally honest with the strategy. We want to make sure that it aligns with their mission, vision, and goals. So that is part of that feedback loop that is really, really critical in product management. Now, when it comes to project management for clients, obviously we're going to come here, we're going to move this over. Once we get our first win, we'll move it over to active projects. And then eventually, once that client leaves, we will move them to done. Now, in active projects, again, we'd want to build in that feedback loop so that way we're asking for feedback as much as possible without being a burden. So maybe that's every 45 days, maybe it's every 60 days. You find a cadence. What we do is we actually do a weekly report. And at the bottom of it, every week, there's just a simple message that asks for feedback. Now, clients don't do it every week, but it gives them an opportunity to give that feedback. And then our account executives also go in there and close that feedback loop. Now, this is high level how I manage client projects at a bird's eye view. It really gives me broad scope, and you can add more things in here and change the way this looks. So if you want to look at this as a list, you can come in here and see where everything is. So as an owner, I can come in and look at all my projects, look at where they are, and really help move people through. Basically, what I want to do here is now build in anything else that I would need to see at the bird's eye. So for my team, we can add a new section, and it could be right here, it could be issues. So this is one that we use. A lot of times it's payment issues, or it could be quality issues internally. So let's just say we're working with a client and they gave us really bad feedback. They said, hey, I hated the video review. This is the worst edit I've ever seen. You guys suck. Now, I don't edit videos. This is just an example, but that's actually really good for the business. So even though it's bad feedback, it gives us an opportunity to close that gap. So again, let's look at this project management board. We've gotten this feedback, and we're assuming for this, most of my clients are on retainer, or we just want them to reorder. So that feedback, basically you have to figure out how to solve that. So obviously in this case, we would do a revision, maybe we reassign an editor. There's a whole bunch of things we can do to actually improve the business, but we want to take care of that client, because as soon as they start complaining, that account is at risk. And so that's why it gets priority and goes into issues. You could have one for billing issues, and basically this board as a whole, again, is that bird's eye view. So if you have 100 clients, if you have 200 clients, if you have 1,000 clients, you can manage all of them just like this. Now, the next step in here is you could build, each client would have their own project. So before we get into that, I really want to show you more of internal project setups. So I do things pretty unique when it comes to internal projects. What we'll do here is, I got to make this a little bigger. We're going to start from scratch. So in here, I'm going to go to my project board. I'm going to create a new board. So we're going to call this internal projects. We're going to kind of come in here and Scott's project board, use template. I don't want to use a template. All right, so we'll use a template just because it's forcing me to do it. We can just call this projects. It's in our product. It will be shared with my team. You can change your rules here. So this is what a project comes out, basically blank. Now for internal projects, I do it a little different. And this is just how I set up the board. Because again, you got to think of how things are moving through this. With my internal team, we're going to have ideas. So ideas is the first step. And then we need a new section. I mentioned the priorities. Now priorities are more important with things that just don't have to be done every single day. So let's think of like continuous improvement, rev ops, building partnerships, building new landing pages, marketing material, any kind of project, maybe even it's internal training, maybe it's a university for your team. These are all great projects, but the problem is a lot of people get overwhelmed, especially your staff. So if we go back to the original example of, wouldn't it be nice if we could just email our team and they'd get it done? That can be the case if they put it into the project management software. But as a founder, I have hundreds of ideas, and half of them never get completed because they shouldn't. They're just not the right priority. And I teach how to understand what is the true constraint in your business. So it's super short. It's something that's going to increase revenue. It's going to increase lifetime value. It's going to reduce risk, or it's going to recapture time for your team or for yourself. That would potentially be a priority. But then in there, what is going to do the most of that? So if you have one that'll do that, but it's very expensive, it takes a lot of time, but you have another one that will actually, if you increase show rates on your sales team, it'll increase lifetime value or it'll increase revenue. That's probably a lot cheaper. So we just have to think about that. So what I do here is I do P1. So that's a project. It's a P1. Then we have P2 and so on. You can have multiple levels of priorities. I wouldn't go more than like 3 or 4. Probably wouldn't go more than 3. And then what we do here is, so I'll have another stage here for approvals, and then we'll have one just for completed projects so we can track it. So again, now that we have this is where as a founder, I can start listing all my ideas, or I can email my team and say, hey, add this to the idea board, add this to the project board, and they'll add it in there. And then during your normal one-on-one cadence or team meeting cadence, you can start determining where you're going to put these projects in and who you're going to assign them to. So let's just come up with like email marketing Okay, so we'll come up with a couple projects like email marketing, new landing page, anything like that. So when they sit in ideas, this is really for anyone on your team or by department to put their ideas here. So typically we break up our projects by C-suite, they have their own board, and then each team that's actually actively running projects, like my marketing team does a lot of projects, they have their own board. That way they have their one-on-ones, they have their reviews, they have their team meetings, and they can go over that with their team. So in here, the biggest thing that you have to understand is one person can't have too many top priorities. So if I put 10 top priorities and assign them all to John, John's going to be overwhelmed and he's not going to be able to get them done. So what we have to do is basically what we can do is say, okay, so email marketing is going to bring us in new leads, and we think it's a very important project. So we're going to put this as number one. Now, I want to have another project assigned to John because he's probably not going to work 100% on email marketing because he gets a bottleneck, a constraint, he gets stuck. So I'm going to also have him work on the landing pages because obviously he's working on new rev opportunities. So those are both going to be assigned to John. And in this case, I'm just going to use me so we can see what it looks like. And then we just have to fill out the information from before. So we want to have our owner, our due date, order details, priority, and goal. Now, again, this is an internal order. So order details are just going to be the project details. What needs to be done? What does good look like? What is complete? So with a landing page, you could have good as, complete the landing page and look aesthetic. Or it could be complete the landing page, A/B test it, and come up with one that gets conversions of at least 10% on warm traffic or ads traffic or email. Since we're talking about email, so email would be much lower. So maybe at a 2% conversion rate on email traffic. So that's where understanding that just finishing something versus giving this opportunity to get basically the product done. So not quite finished yet. There's a few more things that I want to show you to really build this, especially on the internal projects. When we come in here, basically want to build these pipelines by the stages. So one of the things you could do is add a stuck stage. So stuck is actually really important because there are a lot of times where there's a constraint in the business. So for this landing page example, it could be stuck because the person doesn't have access to the website. So they've been assigned this, they don't have access to the website, or they need a graphic designer, they don't have one assigned, they don't have a budget, they don't have a card. So it goes into stuck, and what they can do is either assign it to the manager and say, hey, I need this, as soon as you get back, reassign it to me. Or they can just tag the manager and say, hey, I'm stuck, I'm put this into stuck, this is the information I need, this is the data I'm requesting it. And the nice thing about any of these project management tools is that they're gonna put a date here. So hi, and I leave the comment, I can obviously tag the person, but it says when I did that. So the advantage for your team is as they're asking for things, if 3 weeks go by and the manager was like, oh, why didn't we finish this yet? And you'd be like, well, I tagged you and I asked you 4 times, here's the information. As soon as I get that, I'll get started. So this really allows them to continue. And when they get stuck on a project, if they really are stuck and they can't move forward, they can either work on the P1 or they can move a new project from ideas over to P2 until they're able to get unstuck. Now, on top of that, what you can do is you can have this as approval. So approval here for that landing page. Remember, we talked about the goal. So if we had a clear goal, let's just say it's a 15% conversion rate on email traffic. So maybe this just says, waiting on results. So before approval or, testing, whatever is actually happening in your business can be a stage in here that's consistently building success for you. So on this, the project's not done just because the landing page is done. Now we're A/B testing until we get the copy to the point where it's actually returning a result. So remember before I said a project is only really worth doing if it brings in new revenue, if it increases lifetime value, if it reduces risk in a business, or if it recaptures time. And if it's not doing one of those things and we finish a project but didn't do any of those things, we can't actually track it down, it might not have been the right activity. But hopefully that you found this helpful. If you did, please subscribe. And if you want to learn more about the Founder Systems AI course and community, check it out below. And of course, I have all of my checklist and my best materials down below for free. So you can grab that and it will walk you through how I do project management. So hopefully you can start implementing that in your business today.